Welcome to another day of learning. I welcome you back to my channel Tech with Machines. Today's topic is tuples. We already covered tuples as one of the sequence types in our previous video, and now today we are going to go and do a little deep dive with tuples and what are the methods and the way we can create tuples, and also some advanced concepts which are related to tuples. If you have checked my earlier video, we have also talked about lists in a similar manner where we went with different methods and accessing patterns of lists. Today, it's turn of tuples. Let's do a quick review of what tuples are. A tuple in Python is an ordered collection of items. It is similar to a list, which means it can contain items of different types. It can contain heterogeneous elements. However, tuples are immutable, which means once you create them, you can't modify them, you can't change them, or you can't add anything to them. Whereas it is different in list. Lists are mutable and we can add, modify, append, remove, or pop from list. So this is a general definition of a tuple. Along with this, we're also going to understand some advanced concepts about tuples. Like list, tuples has tuple comprehensions. Though they are not very talked about concept or used concept, but tuple do support comprehensions similar to lists, which is a concise way of generating a new list using a for loop, right? Tuple unpacking, on the other hand, is accessing the elements or unpacking the individual values of a tuple. You can return multiple values if in a tuple instead of just a single value if you're returning a tuple as a return type of a function. And named tuples are just regular tuples, but they are with named fields. You can basically think about them like you are creating some objects for better readability, right? So let's now deep dive into code. This is what we are going to talk about today in general. So let's start with a new file, tuples.py. I'm again continuing in the same project which we have been using from start of this series, and I have named as 8tuples.py. Now, in our previous video, we talked about how we create a list. List is generally created by using square brackets, and you give the sequence of comma separated elements within those square brackets. Whereas tuples, on the other hand, are defined using parentheses. So let's create a sample tuple. So first thing what we are doing is we are going to create tuples. So let's say creating tuples should be our comment, and we are gonna name the variable as my tuple as we did with the list. Now this will be the sequence of elements, so we'll just give it 1 2 3 4 5 and let's try to print it. So once we print this, let's do python tuples.py and we can print the tuple, right? So this is one way of creating a tuple. Now if we don't want to use, I can also create a tuple without parentheses. It will still be considered as a tuple. This is basically called tuple packing, where I can simply just create it as a comma separated values. So my tuple equal to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? Now if you have a doubt that how this is a tuple, this is generally called tuple packing, where you can actually give a list of comma separated elements and consider that as a tuple. So now if I do print, if you remember that we use type inbuilt function to basically get the type of a particular variable which we are using. So we'll do the same thing here and we'll say type of my tuple and we'll try to print this. So let's do that, and as you can see it printed class tuple, right? Now we can also create a tuple like a single element tuple, and if I want to do that, the single element tuple is actually created like something like this. So single element tuple, So let's say I'm creating a single element tuple. Let's call it also single element tuple, and we are gonna just use the parenthesis and the first element and the comma. This is how we create a single element. Now, why do we need a trailing comma? It is needed to actually, because if you are just doing a parenthesis and a one, it can be defined as an expression, right? So to differentiate it from an expression which is basically inside a parenthesis, a trailing comma somehow considers it as a tuple. So let's try to do both. Now if I just print type of this particular single element tuple and try to basically run this, you will see that finally it's class tuple. But if I don't put a trailing comma, what happens? So let's say this is going to be an expression, so I'm going to call it expre, and I am going to just give 1. So what happens now? Now if I do print type of expre and run the file, as you can see, it said it's a class int. It didn't really understood this as a class tuple, right? So that's the beauty of Python, how you can just with small tricks create such complex data type in a straightforward way, right? So another way of creating tuples is by using tuple constructor. So basically what you do is, let's say I'm calling it tuple2, and let's say we are going to use a tuple constructor. So we'll use tuple constructor, and we give it a list basically. So now if I give it as a list, this is going to print my tuple. So let's just print this tuple2 and try to see what happens. And as you can see, it actually ended up printing the tuple, right? Maybe let's try to also print single element type and see how it prints it by a trailing comma. So if we run this, and as you can see, it actually printed it with trailing comma, and also the one which was the tuple packing, let's print that as well. So we'll run it again, and we can see that tuple packing, even though we haven't given parenthesis, it still ended up providing parenthesis for that, right? So this is how generally we create a tuple. Okay, now in the next one, we'll talk about how to access really the elements of the tuple, right? So let's clean this up, and we are gonna keep only my tuple, and we are gonna create, actually we're gonna access element. So it's pretty much similar what we did with lists. We basically used indexing concept, right? So let's clean the console as well so that the output becomes clear. So what we did in list was that generally in tuples and lists, the way you want to access elements is pretty much similar. So if I have to access an element at a particular position, then I will use indexing. So basically I'm gonna just say that print the position 0, right? Because we said that lists or tuples are zeroth based index in Python. So now when I run this, it is going to print one element which is at position 0. And also if you remember, we talked about negative indices, which actually refers to the elements at the end of the list or a tuple. So if I just do the same thing and just say print my tuple but with -1 as an index position, it is going to print 5 in the output. So along with 1, it also printed 5 as an output, right? Now this was how we access tuples. Now another thing was that tuples are immutable in nature, which means you can't modify them, or you can't basically really change the value of tuples, right? You can only create new tuples, but you can't modify an existing tuple. So let's try to modify the way we used to do in list, where we specifically define a position which we want to change and override it. Let's try to do that same with tuple as well. So at the 0th position, I would like to give it a 10 value. Now when we do this, we will see that it will raise an error. So I'm not going to print it because I know that it is going to print an error. So let's just see what the error comes out. So as you can see, it clearly said that tuple as an object doesn't support item assignment. So this means the tuples can't be modified, right? Now if I have to iterate over a tuple, it's pretty much in the same way as we iterate over a list. So you basically do for the particular value which you are gonna refer to in a tuple. So let's say item you're calling it, and in my tuple then let's print the individual element. So we will say print item. Now if we run this, it's actually gonna print 1 2 3 4 5 as the okay, because we didn't remove this assignment. So let's just comment it out and then run the output again. So now as you can see, it actually printed the first element and then the last element because of the two statements which we have at the line number 6 and 7, and then finally it iterated over the tuple and printed 1 2 3 4 5, right? So this is all about how to access, how to create, and how to iterate a tuple. Now in the next one we will talk about, in the next few minutes we'll talk about how we do tuple unpacking. We discovered tuple packing, which was generally a creation of a tuple. Now we'll also discover how to do tuple unpacking. It is a way of accessing elements of a tuple, but how does that really work? Now let's talk about tuple unpacking. So in tuple unpacking, you basically are returning or unpacking individual variables. So let's take the same example. We're going to create my tuple, and I'm going to just say there are 3 elements in it, 1 2 3, using the parenthesis and a comma separated elements or values. Now if I want to access all 3 of them, because it's a fixed length, and I want to actually say give me the first element of this particular tuple individually, what I'll do is I'll say a b c equal to my tuple, and then when I just print this a b c, this is going to basically print the first element, second element, and the third element of the tuple. So now let's try this out, and if I do this and run it, this is going to print 1 2 3. So clear enough, right? That unpacking is when you have a fixed length tuple, you are basically accessing the element directly, unpacking them individually, right? But there is another thing. When you want to access particular elements, but then you also want to group certain elements together, so you can use asterisk with tuple. So star, basically if you do tuple unpacking with star, how does that work? So what we'll do is now we'll extend our list or tuple with few more elements in that. So let's say I'm saying I have now 1 2 3 4 and 5. I generally just want 1 and 5. I really don't want 2 3 4 individually. I just want 1 and 5 individually. I want to unpack them individually. Then I'll say a is my first element. Of course, let's name that as a, and I will do star rest. So I just used a star asterisk with a variable and then did last one as b and assigned it in assignment operator my tuple. Now when I print this a and I print rest and I print b, you will find that it will have grouped 2 3 4 as a list, whereas it has given me an individual 1 and 5 as a and b. So let's run it again, and we are gonna do this. So as you can see, the last 3 rows of this console says that it gave me the first element 1, then it grouped 2 3 4 as a list and gave me 5 as the last element. So basically if you want to unpack elements, but you also want to ensure that if it's a variable length tuple, there are so many elements and you just want to unpack first and the last, and you want to group the mid of it, then you just use asterisk. So it comes handy and it's so straightforward, right? Now also comes tuple concatenation and repetition. Basically I have 2 tuples and I want to merge them. How do I do that? Again, straightforward. Plus operator is my go-to for concatenation. Like happens in string, happens in tuple, happens in list as well. So let's create tuple 1 as, let's say, I'm gonna just create it with tuple packing method. So I'll say 1 2 3, and I'll create tuple 2, which will be 4 5 6, again packing method. And then let's create tuple 3. But if you saw this, there's no in place addition, right? We're actually creating another tuple by adding 2 more. So here we are not doing any modification. So tuple 1 plus tuple 2 should now give me tuple 3, which should be just the combination of 1 2 3 4 5 6. So let's print tuple 3 and let's run this. So as we can see, we got 1 2 3 4 5 6 as the final tuple. Similar goes to repetition. So let's say I wanted to repeat the values 1 2 3 in tuple 1 and create these 3 values within a tuple as a set, right? So what I'll do is I'll create tuple 4 and I'll say tuple 1 multiplied by 3. And if I do that, what it is gonna do is it's gonna print 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 3 in tuple 4. So that's what you see here. It does 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 3 in the last tuple. Okay, so this is called the repeated and the concatenation. Now there's another good use case of tuple. I can use tuple as keys in dictionaries. Yes, I can use them as keys in dictionaries. Like in Java, you can use object as a key in a dictionary as long as you take care of the hash code of the object, right? Similarly, you can use tuple as a key in dictionary, especially when you need a composite key that is immutable. And again, the tuple is immutable, you can't modify it. So if you have a fixed data, if you have a fixed set, so you can basically use tuple as keys in dictionaries, right? So let's say I have coordinates which are not never gonna basically change, right? As a good example, so I will just create coordinates as a dictionary, and inside that I will say tuple as a key, first point 1 and 2, which is x and y, and I'll say it's a point A, right? And I'll create another point which will be 3 and 4, and I'll say it's point B. So it's a key value pair, and amazingly I was able to put tuples as keys in my dictionary. Now how do I access it? I can simply access it the way I do any other dictionary set, right? I use subscript and give it a key. So within subscript I'm giving it tuple as a key, which is 1 comma 2, and if I print it, it ideally should print point A. So as you can see, it printed point A. So it's that easy to use tuple as a key in dictionaries, right? Now tuples can also be used as a function arguments. Okay, and how do you basically use them in function as argument? Let's say you had a function where you are calculating a sum of all the numbers which are being passed. So if you use just asterisk or star numbers, you can actually give it as a tuple. So when you do that and you return generally sum of numbers, let's use the inbuilt method here. So let's call it calculate sum, and let's use an inbuilt method of Python which is sum. Let's do that, and what will happen is, now if you by print calculate sum and I give it 1 2 and 3, it ideally should be printing 6, right? So I think I did something wrong here. So let's use tuple packing instead, because we are using star. So let's do tuple packing, and we will just print this in the next line, right? Okay, format is also okay. So let's run this, and as you can see, it printed the sum as 6. And by the way, we used here an inbuilt sum function of Python. That's why this is being used directly and straightforward, right? So as we can see, these concepts actually explain the flexibility and usability of tuples in Python, and which makes them powerful tool for various programming tasks, right? Now the last concept, tuple comprehensions, which is similar to list comprehension, but in case of like we were creating, if you remember the comprehensions syntax, then it was basically the expression, for loop, the variable, and the iterable, right? So now in this case, we in the case of list, we were creating it within a square bracket. Now in case of tuple, because tuples are created with parentheses, we will use parentheses for doing the comprehension. So let's say I'm doing my tuple and I'll use comprehension. I want to simply just collect x from a range, so I'll say for x in a range of 5, just give me those tuples from 1 to 5. And then when I print my tuple, generally what I'll see is that I have 1 2 3 5 4 5. Okay, this so this is going to create a generator object directly, so you can't directly access it. So when you are using tuple comprehension, generally it will create a generator as an object. If you want to access it, then you'll have to refer the index position of a particular generator object. Now why do it create a generator object and not straightforward tuple? We will discuss about that in upcoming videos, because we will briefly touch generator in upcoming videos, right? So this is how you can do tuple comprehension. Now last not the least, but what are basically going to be named tuples? So let's also discover that. That's our last topic of the video, which is what are the named tuples, right, and how they're useful. So I'm going to clean this up, and I'm also going to clean the console here, and we are going to say topic, we're going to change here, and we're going to say named tuples. So named tuples are just that they're regular tuples, but just that you are actually defining the named fields. So you can think about it like an object or a class where you basically have properties or the attributes of that class, or the or you have certain properties of that particular class, which you basically use to construct them, right? So the named tuples are somewhere similar to the same concept. So named tuples are more readable. They are with named attributes, right? And they create like an object, like an entity. They generally are part of the collections module. Now what is module in Python, we'll also discover that, but just for your information, they are part of the collections module. Okay, so which means if they are part of a module, and if you're accessing anything outside of an inbuilt Python modules, you will have to basically access it using import. So because this is in collections modules, the general format of accessing any module is that I'm going to do from collections import the named tuple, and I'm going to create point as my named tuple. So let's do it and define it as a named tuple, right? And in named tuple, I'm saying that I have an attribute point. The first named attribute is point, and the second set is basically x and y, the 2 points, right? So I have x and as well as I have y. Now let's see how I can construct it. So I'll create a p tuple where I'll say that okay, this is point 1 2, and then I can actually access it just by the properties which I defined x and y. So I'll say p dot x, correct, and comma p dot y. So now if I run this, it's gonna print that 1 and 2 as points of named tuples. So this is all about tuples, what you can do with tuples. So if you discover this, that's a very powerful tool. It's very easy to use, and there are so many things which you can do with tuple, right? So this is all about today's video, and we'll go through other iterables in Python in details in upcoming videos. And finally, we'll also talk about exception handling in modules in Python in general. Thank you for learning with me, and I hope you like this video.